Right, hi everyone. So today's fascinating conversation is with an idol, a living legend. That word gets thrown around, but
Well,
it's
it's going to
very
be may not be fascinating. It's just a conversation. Just call this one a conversation.
conversation.
Just in case it's not fascinating.
Every word that comes out your mouth.
If it turns out to be fascinating, it's a bonus. Don't
All
put me
right.
under pressure.
Well, look, let's start with we're in Liverpool. It's
That's fascinating in itself.
It is. So as you got a great connection with the city, this city, as I know it, people, Liverpudlians, love to stick together. So how did you feel when you first came to Liverpool? I mean, what was it like for you?
Well, of course, I'm here talking to you originally about Jamaica, and Liverpool is very similar. Liverpoolians are like Jamaicans. They identify with each other. They're passionate. They're passionate about. They don't see themselves as English necessarily. Just like Jamaicans don't see themselves as Caribbeans, they see themselves as Jamaicans. So they're very similar to Jamaicans. That's why I've been here for 30 odd years, and I love it.
So you grew up in Jamaica, and I think a lot of people know that you were born in Jamaica. I think some people probably hadn't realised that you spent your formative years actually in Jamaica. So what was life like for you in Kingston?
Life was fantastic for me in Kingston. I lived in our park camp on the army base. My dad was a colonel in the army, so therefore, from I was 5-6 years old, I could be out till 11 o'clock at night, and my parents may not know where I am because I'm safe. In Jamaica, it may not be particularly safe. So I had a very privileged upbringing. As I said, my dad was a colonel in the army, so I went to a good school. Sport was a big part of my life. My dad he's a colonel in the army, but no professional football, but he played football for Jamaica. He played squash for Jamaica. My sisters played squash for Jamaica and swam for Jamaica. So it was a very sporting upbringing. And then, of course, at 13, my dad was then going to be sent to England. I was so excited because having loved football, I'm coming to the home of football, apart from Brazil, for 4 years. So I was very excited about it.
So were you a naturally gifted footballer?
Yeah, I did a lot of sport. I played rugby. I was a very sporting household, but football was always my number one sport.
So at that age, there was this spark there.
Yeah, but I never thought about because I never thought. I'm in Jamaica. There's no professional football. I knew I would play football. If we stayed in Jamaica, I would have played football in Jamaica. Cavaliers was my favorite team. I would have played for Jamaica. I would have to get a job because there's no professional football back then. So I never thought about being a professional footballer. But I knew I'd always play. Because don't forget, worldwide, all over Africa and Asia and everywhere, there may not be professional football, but people still play. Here, from your 5, you think, I want to be a professional footballer. But in other countries, you think, I love football, I'm going to play. I never think I'm going to come to England to be given a chance to play for Watford or Liverpool. But that doesn't mean I would love football any less or not play football. So the idea of being, even when I came to England, the idea of a professional football never entered my mind because I knew the family are coming for 4 years. I'm going back to Jamaica.
Right.
And it was only 6 months before the family went back that Watford saw me playing locally, and they said, "Do you want to come and train, and then do you want to sign for us?"
Wow.
So the first time I thought about really being a professional footballer was probably 6 months before I became one.
How do you think those early years in Jamaica shape you today?
The early years in Jamaica, because of my father and his being an army officer, the discipline was the most important thing. So my father brought me up in a very disciplined way. You need talent, but you need the right attitude, the right commitment, the right determination. Just to give you an example of the way I was brought up, as I said, my sisters used to swim for Jamaica. And I used to swim competitively till I got to 11 years old. And we had to go to swimming training every day. And instead of going to swimming training every day, I would stop off to play football. And my dad said, if you're not going to go to swimming training every day, stop. Because you have to do it with authenticity and integrity. So he says, if you're going to do something, do it. So yes, you need talent, like in anything else, but you need to have the right application and attitude. And because I've been brought up in that way, then when I came to England, I trained hard even as a 14, 15-year-old, not even thinking about being a professional footballer. I used to go running every night around Hyde Park. My dad said, if you're going to be a footballer, you've got to be fit. If you love football and you want to do it, not professionally. So he said, so therefore, those lessons really helped me in life generally, not just in football.
That's like as a result of the discipline, the parental, I suppose, aspect.
Absolutely.
In terms of Jamaica as an environment, though, the culture, the weather, I mean, you played with that flair. Everyone knows that. I mean, do you think there was anything in the air, in the water, in the ground that really shapes you?
Probably the ackee. Because all the Caribbean islands don't eat ackee. And of course, a lot of Caribbean islands, but that came from Trinidad originally. And then Trinidadians always say Jamaicans eat too much ackee. Because you said that also makes them very violent as well. So therefore, people always come up with these stupid things. You never heard it, yeah?
It's true.
Because in all the islands, they don't eat
protein.
ackee. They don't eat ackee, And they have ackee, but they don't eat it. And of course, there's a lot of these stories about if you're from Jamaica, you're like this. Be like Nigerians in Africa.
The
Stereotypes. But ultimately, positive stereotypes can actually help because Jamaicans are achievers. People may call it arrogance, and it probably is arrogance. So from that side of things, it probably helped.
So you come to England in the mid-70s, the height of the NF. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people, made a lot of documentaries about racism during that period in particular. I mean, as a 12, 13-year-old boy entering that environment from this beautiful island with this freedom, I mean, what was that like for you?
It was interesting because, of course, I had more freedom in Jamaica. As much as in Jamaica, you're not going to get more freedom in England generally. But because I lived on the army base, I was free. And then when I was 14 now in England, my mom said, you got to come home by 8 o'clock. I'm saying, in Jamaica, I didn't have to, what's going on? But of course, that's been real life. I'm now in the big bad world. But of course, I fully invested myself in it because playing football, you mix with lots of black and white working class kids who are always out and about and, interesting. So I loved it. I loved it. But of course, my parents were always my biggest role models and the biggest influence on me anyway. So while I saw a lot of stuff, I never got involved in that kind of stuff. So, but I completely understood it.
I mean, as a footballer, everyone knows, the banana incident, racism from the stands. I mean, even that banana incident, you just kicked the banana away. It didn't seem to affect you.
I don't remember doing that at all. The picture's very iconic, but I do not even remember doing it. Because don't forget, this is the situation. That was Liverpool versus Everton. Huge game, two top teams in the country. 1988, that was. From 1981, playing for Watford, bananas were coming on the field. So this was not new.
Yeah.
And in fact, there were more bananas coming on the field that I played before, but because it's Liverpool versus Everton on television, a big deal was made of it. And I'm thinking, why are they making a big deal of this? This has been happening every week for the last 7 years, and no one said a word. Now all of a sudden, you're making a big deal of it. So it wasn't a big deal at all.
But you say it's not a big deal. I mean, today,
Yeah.
you have whole teams walking off the pitch.
Yeah.
Even with, the slightest, slightest is probably the wrong word, but, if there's racism at ground, the whole team will... Would you have preferred it if that was the situation, your team said, we're not putting up with it? I mean, it was a different time.
And what has walking off the pitch done? Has it stopped? So therefore, has that made any difference whatsoever? And in many respects, tokenism doesn't necessarily help, because do you really believe, and I know 100%, do you really believe your white teammates want to walk off the pitch? They don't.
You don't
Do you really
believe
believe that? Please. Of course they don't. Because if they did, they'd be walking off the pitch every single game, but they don't. They don't. So of course, this whole idea, they're taking the knee. All of a sudden now, we're not taking the knee. I don't believe in taking the knee or not taking the knee. But the point is, when people are now taking the knee because they think it's the right thing to do, how can all of a sudden they go, right, we've had enough of that now, if they really meant it in the first place? So if people say, we're going to take a knee, we'll take a knee. If we're not going to take a knee, we're not going to take a knee. Wilfred Zaha stands up and he says he's not taking a knee. So you have to do what you think is right, not what you're forced to do. And with the England team, Gareth Southgate and all of them, they've said that's what you have to do. So they did it, and we went, yeah, well done. Now all of a sudden they've gone, right, we're not doing it now. So if it was that right to do, why did they stop doing it?
Do you think there's something in that disciplined, even you described it, privileged upbringing that allows you to, I wouldn't say dismiss it, but you're quite like Teflon. It doesn't affect you. Whereas I've seen, I've experienced racism, I've seen people, and it can be traumatic. But for you, you seem to almost take it in your stride.
Listen, I was very fortunate that I've been brought up to be to feel fully worthy in the presence of anybody. So regardless of what society, the way society sees me. Now, if society disenfranchised me and discriminated against me tangibly as a young kid, whereby I couldn't eat food and my dad couldn't get a job and, I lived in a council house and I couldn't have any heating, then my attitude would be completely different. So I'm not saying John Barnes is superior to anybody else. It's that my experiences have informed me to look at it in a different way. And as I said, growing up in Jamaica, and I've only not only now, but I'm talking about since in my adulthood, since I've been in my 20s and 30s, that realized that as a youngster in Jamaica, my family, all my friends, all my cousins, I went to a very, very good school. You could discriminate against black working class Jamaicans. So football is a working class sport. So therefore, in England, Jamaica, anywhere, yeah? So none of my cousins and my friends who, my middle class friends in Jamaica, I didn't play football with them. I played in the inner cities. I played in Trenchtown and Arnett Gardens. So these were my friends because I played football with them. They weren't coming home to my house to have dinner with me.
Wow.
And come up to meet my mum and dad. It's not a question of, wow, that's the same all over.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and at the time, I didn't think, I'm a middle class boy and these people are beneath me. This is just the way life was. So this is the way you have been brought up and this is the way we've been conditioned to think. Until I now understand that as much as you talk about racism here and it's terrible what's going on, and you can look at what's going on with white working class people. Some of them are equally as disenfranchised, not through their colour, but through other reasons. So therefore, I understand the idea of discrimination. Which is not just about race, it's also about gender, about class, north and south. I got to train in Houston the other day, and there's this discussion on a building site, and the foreman said to the worker, he made a mistake, he goes, that's a very northern attitude to have. Now they're both white. because of the perception of people from up north. So this is what we have to understand. It's a very, very nuanced discrimination. It's a very, very nuanced and complex subject that we're trying to simplify just to make it black and white.
No, completely. I completely understand what you're saying, and I completely understand what you're saying in terms of, you know, we're obviously a product of our environment, our upbringing, and you know, your experience is really genuine. I mean, you seem to have sort of transitioned from footballer, ex-pro to a social commentator, someone that talks about.
I haven't transitioned at all. But now there's an environment for us to talk about it. I've always felt this way, but I couldn't speak about this 30 years ago. Not because I was scared, because no one was interested. You think there would be a television program 30 years ago when I played to let's talk about discrimination and racism in football? Because I used to talk about it with my friends all the time.
Right.
Yeah, my other black friends and stuff like that. We had this conversation,
Yeah.
but we can never have because in many respects they really aren't interested either. They just have to be seen to be interested. So of course it's great to have these programs now, but is anything really changing? As much as now you can look at how many black people are there now on television. There's in a 4% black population. There's more than 4% black people on television, but nothing's changing for the black people in the city. So we're given the illusion of change because now there are more black privileged people being given opportunities, but nothing really changes.
So you're talking about sort of structure of racism, also the context of it, which I find fascinating. Do you think, I've heard you on, say, 5 Live debating someone from Black Lives Matter. You both have the same end objective.
Absolutely.
You know,
about it different ways.
But you disagree so profoundly.
Well, let me tell you, structural racism. You know what structural racism does? And structural discrimination, which has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. It allows, and I will call them unconsciously racist people. Because I don't want to call racist, because of course people go, I'm not racist, as you've heard. But structural racism allows, and let's call them racist for now, but unconsciously, so I'm not having too much of a go at them. Structural racism allows them not to take responsibility for being a racist, because it's not their fault. Because A, they're not doing it. So if you're suffering, that's nothing to do with me. So therefore they don't see themselves as being racially biased at all because of the structures in place. And unless you're going to dismantle those structures, which we're not, that's always going to exist.
I think, what would you say is kind of John Barnes's end goal here? Is it to educate? Is it to make a change? I mean,
it really doesn't matter about my end goal because it's going to be very difficult for me or people like me to make a real impact. Because
I think you are making an impact.
Well, at the level that it needs to be done, because we live in a.
Do you not believe in ground up change?
Absolutely, ground up change, but we're not doing that, are we? We talk about top down. Top down, trickle down economics doesn't work, but that's what we're talking about. So what do we say? What do we say? What are we saying? We need more black people up there. We need more women up there. We need more. That's what we're saying, isn't it? We need representation up there, but we have representation up there. And as it trickle down, no, it's just got to be from the bottom up. But unfortunately, in the environment we live in, unless people say unless you're in that to change it, but my view is if you're in it, you can't change it. So it has to be from the bottom up. But down at the bottom, we haven't got enough power because the system doesn't want to change.
Well, it's a pleasure speaking to you, John Barnes. You're a childhood idol of mine. My brother supported Liverpool because as young Indian kids, Asian kids,
Who did you support?
we were Liverpool fans.
You just said your brother, you never said you.
Well, this was the story, this is the lineage. So because of you, you've created a whole new generation of Liverpool fans. So my brother, you were, as young Indian kids, we didn't have anyone to sort of look up to, and we closely resonated with you at Liverpool, the way you played, the flair, and it was obviously a great championship winning side at the time. I was the younger brother, idolised my older brother, who idolised you, and my son today sports Liverpool, his son today sports Liverpool, so we've got...
your son's son?
Sorry, my brother's son.
Oh, your brother's son.
I
said my son and his son.
He said it.
We had
his son.
I should have cleared that up. But anyway, we've got a generation of Liverpool fans because of you.
We're coming next season again.
I'd like to thank you for that, and it's a fascinating conversation with the amazing John Barnes. Thanks, guys.